LG G4 is the best OLED from the Korean manufacturer that a lot of people have been waiting for. Its predecessor, the G3, stood on the podium in prestigious competitions such as the UK TV Shootout, for example. At first glance, the new model looks identical. The TVs have the same chassis, come with identical remote controls, and are based on similar operating systems. However, LG announced a new image processor and a broadly improved picture quality during CES in Las Vegas. Today, we will be able to test this in detail using our extensive hardware facilities. You can count on detailed measurements, results of test procedures, as well as a direct comparison with the competition in the form of the Samsung S95D and several other LCD mini LED TVs. Are you wondering what is the best OLED of this year? Then make sure to subscribe and watch the episode to the end. Please also be reminded that the links to purchase the TVs from verified sources can be found in the description. Let's get started. The OLED display market was relatively predictable when LG was the only matrix manufacturer, as it was 3 years ago. All screens used the same panel, so it didn't make much difference to image quality, whether you bought the lowest or the highest model. The situation changed drastically after Samsung introduced QD OLED matrices, which featured much better performance. LG's answer to this was OLED MLA technology, and the battle for the best picture began anew. Matrices with micro-lens technology are now used only in the high-end models, which you can now see on the screen. This means that the G4, which will be tested today, is the only 2024 OLED from LG next to the very rare M4 line, which has a panel of this type, and it shall be much more powerful than the C or B series. What's more, the matrix will be available in sizes from 55 to 83 inches. Although there also is the giant 97-inch LG G4, it unfortunately has a weaker non-MLA matrix, and those who decide to spend 120K to buy it may experience a big disappointment. The LG G4, specifically the G45LW, which we acquired for testing from Polish market, came to us with a dedicated wall mount. This is a hallmark of the G series, which has lacked a factory base for several years. If one wants to place a TV on a piece of furniture, one must purchase the base separately. There were some announcements that a version with a stand was to appear this year, and I guess this has actually happened in some markets, as the test by Earthing shows. Nevertheless, I do not see any Polish stores, so for the test purpose we use a universal mount. We shall briefly discuss the design of the TV as it looks best on the wall. The included brackets allows for attaching the TV literally without leaving any space. As you can see, there is a special groove on the back of the TV so that the mount does not stand out even at its thickness. The frame of the screen, as it is in OLEDs, is extremely slimmed down, and basically the entire surface is filled with the image. The signal connectors have been placed on the left side of the TV except for the power socket, which is in the center. All of them are accessed by recess in the chassis so that the plug-in cables do not interfere with the wall. The TV is equipped with an Alpha 11 processor, which I will talk more about later. What's important is that all HDMI ports work in 2.1 specification, so it doesn't matter where we plug the latest console or PC. The HDMI 2 connector with the eARC function can be plugged to an amplifier or soundbar so that the sound goes out from the TV to external speakers. The coating of the matrix immediately draws attention after assembling the TV. It is glossy, which is typical for OLEDs. It usually brings advantages such as a very good blacks in bright outdoor lighting. Here, however, the effect is somewhat thwarted by the MLA technology, as this is basically the only drawback of this solution. As you can now see on the comparison, the traditional OLED retains deeper blacks and contrast under strong external lighting. Nevertheless, it cannot be said that the G4 is weak in this regard. Compared to an LCD mini LED screen that is good in this field, the TCL C855 performs minimally worse, but it does a much better job of suppressing light reflections. In terms of the blacks, on the other hand, it looks much better than the Samsung's competitor, the QD OLED. In particular, from the matte S95D, which does a great job of suppressing reflections, but unfortunately has a noticeably washed-out image when viewed during the day, as you can see in this comparison. Slight improvement in the matrix coating can be observed compared to the last year's LG G3. As you can now see, the G4's coating is minimally darker and produces less reflections. So the daytime contrast is pretty good, but how about reflections and brightness? As for direct light sources, they are almost perfectly suppressed. Their visibility could be problematic only if the matrix was too dark for the interior. Here is the great news. The G4 is one of the brightest OLEDs ever. It reaches a full 600 nits of brightness for moderate scenes in SDR. In case of the programs with high average picture level, such as sports like ski jumping or hockey, the TV shall maintain a stable 350 nits. These are great results and are equally good as for the Samsung S95D, which allow for comfortable viewing even in rooms with significant backlighting. The G4 may be too dark only in living rooms with very large windows, such as the one behind me in full sunlight. In any other case, the brightness reserve will be sufficient. Comfortable watching in the living room is enhanced by the matrix's fantastic viewing angles. In general, OLED MLA and QD-OLED matrices can be confidently described as perfect in this respect. No matter how far from the center we watch, the image looks exactly the same. Compared to a regular LCD TV or a regular OLED without the microlens layer, this is a huge difference. It is worth taking this into account when you have a wide room or even if you sit very close to the large screen. This is how the angle between your eyes and the edge of the screen is created. It's time to turn off the lights and talk about how the G4 performs in a cinema environment. Traditionally, for an OLED TV, this is when the magic happens. In dark movie scenes, we lose track of where the edge of the TV is because the black doesn't emit any light. It is not surprising that those who are passionate about movies and series and once buy an OLED screen, they never want to go back to an LCD. Of course, the top mini LED screens offer very high contrast as well as can be compared to OLED in many scenes, but let's look at this example. No more words are needed. It is hard to complain about the TV when it comes to the details in black. It was able to reproduce the most subtle elements without excessive darkening or highlighting. Due to that, it almost perfectly matched the display used as a benchmark in our studio. Further tests expose a flaw in the G3 model, which has been resolved in the G4 tested today. It concerns problems with tonal transitions in very dark scenes during motion, better known as false contouring. If you look at the screen now, you will see an artificial outline on the actor's arm, which is not generated by the new model. A similar difference occurs in this very dark scene from the House of the Dragon series. Here, we see a much smoother tonal transition. It is obvious that these scenes look better on the new model. The calibrated G4 is hardly inferior to studio-grade monitors in terms of color accuracy, which is not surprising. LG's top TVs have the option of so-called 3D LUT calibration to achieve reference color reproduction. This is why LG OLED TVs are recommended to film professionals as a consumer reference screens. When it comes to the color reproduction offered by the OLED G4 TV, the charts will tell us a lot. As you can see, the measured color samples are exactly in their fields. The EOTF curve perfectly coincides with the reference and the wide DCI P3 color gamut is fully covered. There is a high probability that the G4 will be described as the TV capable of the most accurate color reproduction in this year. Of course, we talk about the state after professional calibration. Even the factory filmmaker or cinema settings are prone to some imperfections depending on the particular unit we got. The unit that we got required some calibration in areas such as white balance and gamma. The deficit of the blue component caused a yellowish image in the factory filmmaker mode. This small peak in gamma in turn caused the darkest details to blend with the blacks. These are not big distortions, but as I mentioned, particular units with different manufacturing date will not be the same. In order to obtain accurate colors, it is best to order a professional calibration. You can find more information about it on the ScalibriTV.com website. And now let's get back to the test. When it comes to the gamut coverage, which describes how strongly saturated colors in the matrix is able to display, the TV's capabilities end at DCI P3. Unfortunately, the new LG TV has not improved on the subject of reproducing even more saturated colors from the BT 2020 gamut. Here, the coverage is still limited and inferior to, for example, QD OLEDs. Is this a big loss? Definitely no. It won't be easy to notice this deficit in movies for the next few years, since the most video content is also limited to P3 due to the capabilities of the studio equipment. Only some games or specially prepared test materials will reveal this difference. Let's talk about how Ultra HD movies and series look on this TV. As I mentioned, we have excellent blacks and fantastic colors here, so it is natural to expect an immersive image of great quality. It cannot be otherwise. As soon as we turn on something from Netflix or from an Ultra HD Blu-ray disc, we are greeted by a beautiful, colorful image that is a pleasure to watch. It's time to throw some familiar difficult scenes on the screen which shall pose a greater challenge for the TV. It copes quite well with the brightest shots at my disposal, and that is for two reasons. First, it's very bright, so it has a lot of space to display detail in light. Second, it adapts to HDR metadata, so it doesn't over-darken movies that are poor in effects. The new function introduced this year allows to manually change metadata processing. We can now manually control the roll-off point, so it is possible to balance between keeping the brightness high or preserving more details. That's a cool feature, but I do not recommend tampering with it, as the factory values are really good. There is also a dynamic tone mapping option, but it artificially brightens the picture as in previous years, so I advise against using it. And if one has already purchased the TV, it's best to check whether it's not turned on by default in a given picture mode. Such issues do not occur in Dolby Vision content because tone mapping happens there automatically, which is the biggest advantage of this technology over the HDR10. With Dolby movies, it's also possible to notice an advantage in difficult scene over the Samsung S95D. Despite having a slightly more powerful QD OLED matrix, it loses out on effect reproduction through lack of support for this technology. These are not frequent moments due to the huge capabilities of both the TVs, and most of the time they go head-to-head. However, it is undoubtedly better to have Dolby Vision than not to have it. We will now measure HDR brightness on 5 selected movie scenes and contrast the results with other TVs as we always do. The first thing that strikes the eye is the very high stability of the effect. It doesn't matter if the bright light is the size of a small star in the black sky, or if it's in a large beam of light from a flashlight, the effect is always clear. It only weakens on the last scene, which always overloads OLEDs due to the large luminous area. It should be noted here, however, that the G4 performs better than the Samsung S95D and clearly better than the G3. There is no point in mentioning Philips' latest OLED because it doesn't have the MLA technology, but we decided to add it into the comparison to broaden the context. I must mention that Philips has more powerful models as well. The TCL C855 was included here for the same reason. It's a mini LED with a very large number of dimming zones. Traditionally, for this type of technology, it can produce a great deal of light in the final scene. Nevertheless, when the light effects are small or localized on the black background, it hardly looks like HDR content. A stable OLED effect is definitely more appealing to me than this. So as you can see, the OLED G4 offers very good results in the most important quality criteria. It has high brightness in both SDR and HDR, great viewing angles, perfect blacks and reference colors. The test so far consists of practically nothing but praise. Unfortunately, the TV also has its weaknesses. It is the smoothness of tonal transitions which is far from ideal, so even if we watch the highest quality materials, we are exposed to sharp tonal transitions. These can be noticed not only in dark scenes like those from The Green Knight, but also in lighter ones from, for example, The Martian. This problem, referred to as banding or posterization, is unfortunately easily noticeable even by not very skilled viewer and can diminish the pleasure of viewing. In this area, the Samsung S95D as well as the QD OLED TVs have a clear advantage as the posterization problem is persistent with OLED matrices from LG. Let's abandon the topic of Ultra HD content for a moment and deal with something more down-to-earth. In terms of motion reproduction, the TV performs very well. It has a 144 Hz matrix and a well-known true motion compensation system. This allows to adjust the smoothness and clarity of the moving objects. It is worth mentioning at this point that frame interpolation is limited to 120 Hz, as with any manufacturer. The highest refresh rate can only be obtained from a PC, but let's return to it later. The true motion system is divided to 2 sliders. The judder adjusts smoothness in movies and the blur adjusts clarity in sports and related material. The 10-step adjustment will allow everyone to choose the right setting for themselves. Our recommendation is a value between 2 and 5 on the first slider to reduce jerky motion in movies, and 10 on the second for maximum sharpness in sports content. Our tests show that even at the maximum setting, the amount of artifacts such as pixelization or stuttering when the ball flies is negligible, so it works really well. Using maximum motion interpolation, we achieved really high image clarity, which is typical of OLED matrices due to their short pixel response time, which is close to 0. Please note that there is no smearing behind the test UFO image captured in motion. This is a big advantage of OLEDs over LCD screens. Other reviews of this TV mention the occasional frame drop of the image which causes a micro stutter when watching TV. I will say frankly that we have not detected this problem. However, it might be relevant that we tested the TV with true motion enabled. I think that such a stuttering motion that appears in movies watched on OLED TVs without any motion compensation system is simply unpleasant to watch. Nevertheless, I do not see the point of making a separate stutter category, as for example Earthings does, when we have a very effective motion compensation system available on the TV. It is only essential to remember about it, as in filmmaker mode, for example, it is turned off by default. I give a high score to motion reproduction. The highest one shall be deserved by the first OLED with a refresh rate of 240 Hz to achieve even less blur, but it's unlikely that we would see one this year. Although year after year the quality of the video materials produced increases, we can still encounter SD channels on TV or HD channels subjected to high compression. How does the G4 handle this, and does its newly announced Alpha 11 processor bring any improvements? So in terms of upscaling, the TV copes rather typically. The picture doesn't have excessively fuzzy edges, but they aren't exceptionally smooth either. Detail is preserved similarly to other high-end TVs. What is striking, however, is the artificial sharpening of contours, even when all related functions are turned off and sharpness is set to 0. This is a slight change compared to the LG G3, which did not impose so much artificial sharpening. Can this be considered an advantage? Well, yes and no. The slight interference might help low-quality materials, but on the other hand, it can exacerbate the ringing effect around the edges. Finally, it is possible to achieve a similar effect with the right setting in the older model. It looks to me like a little manipulation done by the manufacturer. There are several paragraphs in the pre-release announcement praising the artificial intelligence in the latest Alpha 11 processor, but then we examine the TV, and it turns out that this artificial sharpness can be added manually. I can't help a feeling that AI had more to do with generating those marketing slogans than in creating the new algorithms. However, please do not take this as a criticism of the TV, but as a criticism of marketing. The TV copes well with low-quality content because it allows for disabling the overscan, which is the artificial trimming of the edges of the image on the built-in tuners. Might seem like an obvious thing, but the competing S95D always loses parts of the image in a Z resolution. And then there is the most important thing, the smooth gradation function that can reduce posterization resulting from excessive image compression, which is often complained about. This function is quite effective in softening tonal transitions, although I do not recommend using a higher setting than medium because it may blur the details of the image. But even this setting does not eliminate the problem completely, as for example Sony does. Nevertheless, it is much better than the features in Samsung's TCL or Philips. It is quite a paradox that the TV is able to fix problems with grading in the low-quality materials, but at the same time, it has its shortcomings, as I mentioned earlier. To sum up everything we have said regarding how the TV handles the low-quality material, I must say that it does well. Not so well as Sony does, but better than the vast majority of competitors on the market. The time has come to discuss the last two ways in which the TV can serve, that is, console and PC gaming. In both of these categories, we can confidently give the TV the highest rating. When it comes to consoles, the LG G4 supports literally everything a user could ask for. In 4K 120Hz mode, we will play in both Dolby Vision and HDR10, where I personally prefer the latter option. That is because the manufacturer has correctly implemented the IGA-G function. It means that the checkboard for setting brightness in games accurately disappears at the TV's real value of about 1500 nits, and the console can tone map HDR effect by itself. It is also worth mentioning that the gaming mode can be calibrated just as precisely as for casual viewing. It provides a very low input lag and reference colors. Since I already mentioned the topic of signal lag, it amounts to a fantastic 14 milliseconds with a 60Hz signal and a fantastic 5 milliseconds with a 120Hz signal, regardless of the type of HDR format. AOLM and VRR also work great, although in the latter mode we can observe the traditional slight flickering on dark gray tones. Yet it does not render the game less enjoyable. The whole experience is complemented by a game bar. Connecting a computer instead of a console, we get as much as 144 Hz, which will give an even clearer image in motion. The readability of the fonts is good because the shape of the pixels is nearly a square. Having said that, we shall now leave the topic of image quality and move on to discussion on the operation of the TV. LG displays have been using WebOS for years, which is a very user-friendly interface. Its operation is not particularly different from other operating systems such as Tizen or Google TV. However, the manufacturer has taken a more conservative approach to certain aspects, which I personally like. For example, we still have an input button on the remote control to quickly change sources, but the TV does not display plenty of hardware configurations wizards when we connect a new device. The remote control has most of the usual keys, so it's easy to enter the channel number or enter the settings. The controller also has a super convenient solution, which is an accelerometer that controls the cursor on the screen by following wrist movements. This completely eliminates the need to connect a mouse to the TV, even if you want to browse the internet. Another huge advantage of the WebOS system is the support of all the features we tested. Recording to portable drives that can be timed works great here. There are voice commands in many languages which can be given to the microphone on the remote control. There's AirPlay, Miracast, and the ability to pair Bluetooth headphones and use them at once with the built-in speakers. The file player handles all video files and codecs except for the prehistoric ASF container and the latest VVC codec, which has not been played by any TV yet. It is more picky about subtitles, although the popular SRT with regional characters is supported here. When it comes to streaming apps, LG has always taken care to support them quickly. As a result, our list is basically complete. Only HBO Max is absent because it has already been replaced by the new Max app, so this is no loss. All in all, there is a good chance that we will never have to buy any additional device to enhance this TV with some functionality. I am almost sure of it, because LG is a manufacturer that really cares about the user who buys a TV. I have a C8 model in my bedroom, which is now in its 7th year since release, but all the apps still work on it and the system runs quickly and responsively. Moreover, the manufacturer gave a special promise on the release day, which regarded for a new program, which guarantees that the new models will get support and updates minimum 5 years after their release. Before we get to the summary, let's talk more about the sound. In general, the TV plays well. There are no noticeable distortions at high volume levels. Dialogues are clear and the sound is not dominated by any particular tones. There is also some low bass, so the sound isn't flat like in lower-end TVs. Of course, please bear in mind that we are talking about speakers built into the TV. They aren't bad, however, it would be better to buy external speakers or at least a soundbar if this TV is to be a home theater component. What on the other hand is important and appreciated in terms of sound is the fact that the TV supports all Dolby Digital and DTS formats, so we can confidently connect all peripherals to the TV and output the sound via HDMI ARC. Time for a recap. The LG G4 is a very similar TV to last year's G3. The changes between the new and the old model are cosmetic, but all of them are positive. These range from less posterization in moving direct scenes to slightly higher brightness in HDR and SDR, and support for 144 Hz signal from a PC. It means that this is a very successful product that will compete for the title of the best TV this year. Its performance is great in virtually every field, so whether you watch during the day or in the dark, whether you're interested in movies and TV series, or perhaps you're a sports fan or a gamer, this TV should fully satisfy you. The only drawback we will have to put up with is the not-so-good tonal transitions, through which a posterization effect can be seen sometimes. The final question is whether the LG G4 is worth its price, or it's better to choose something else. The closest competitor to this TV is a Samsung S95D, to which there were many references during the test. Samsung is slightly cheaper at the moment, but the situation may change over time. In terms of picture quality, these two TVs are close to each other. The Samsung has slightly better top HDR effects, but in turn lacks Dolby Vision. Theoretically, it's brighter and has a more matte coating, but it handles low-quality TV materials not so well and its colors fade more in late environments. The G4 has a more traditional operating system and remote control, which is more convenient for me personally. It also supports more features and DTS audio. I think that I would personally prefer the LG, but this does not mean that you, dear viewer, should do the same. Both TVs are worthy of recommendation, and I leave shopping links from a verified source to both of them in the video description. Moreover, the Philips OLED 959 and Panasonic Z95A, which will also feature an OLED MLA matrix, will debut later this year. They may be an interesting competition, nevertheless, they will probably be more expensive than the aforementioned duo. We can also mention the Samsung S90C, but this TV won't offer such high quality. It will rank somewhere between the G4 and the C4. There are top LCD mini LED TVs as well that could try to measure up and would probably win in some selected categories, such as brightness. However, I'm convinced that none of them will offer such a good effect overall, especially when viewed after dark. The Sony Bravia 9 and TCL C955 may come close to that, but they start at a much higher size. We will definitely test all of them and directly confront other TVs, so make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it. And if you want to enjoy the full potential of the picture offered by your TV, then feel free to visit calibre.tv.com. Bye!